Hi, can you hear me okay? I returned to Dublin, New Hampshire, broken. 5 years earlier, my husband Ian and I had moved away to the city. I had spent the first chunk of my early 20s in a very small, quiet town in this area. And we were moving for more nightlife, more people, more restaurants, more museums, more racial diversity and cultural diversity. Unfortunately, we never found more time in the city. We worked. And I wound up in a difficult job to which I was ill-suited. And I'm an optimist, so I just smiled and stepped confidently over the bleached bones of the predecessors who had occupied the position before and did my best. And a few months and a few 85-hour work weeks later, I realized a positive attitude was not enough. And so we were driven out back to New Hampshire by the high cost of living, the insane work hours, and the desire to have children near family. So I moved back on June 9th, 2009. And I know it was June 9th, 2009 because it rained. And the rain, the sort of rushing sound, it was soothing and cleansing. And I was grateful for it that first day. It rained again the next day. The day after that, it rained all day, hard. The next 3 weeks, every day, it rained. Some days were sort of a misting, kind of like a constant raspberry from the sky. Most days it was just a deluge from morning till night, like a biblical punishing rain that made me feel like I had made a terrible, terrible mistake moving back to New Hampshire. But I'm an optimist, and I decided to be proactive and to address the situation. I decided I was going to bring some more diversity into my life, and I announced to my husband Ian I was going to start a group for Black women in New Hampshire. However, I was not at all sure how to find members in my group. But I did what I usually do when I'm searching for answers. I Googled it. Google is amazing, because you can ask for the molecular structure of belly button lint and it will return hundreds of results, which is why I was so dismayed that when I entered Black Women New Hampshire, it came back with 5 results, and one of them was about black bears. I thought maybe I would just hang out in the black hair care section at CVS, but that's creepy. After a while, it just pushes the legal boundaries, so I continued to sit and stare out the window at the rain, and it got bad. One morning I was sitting in front of a big picture window in our kitchen, staring at the rain, and I saw kind of out of the corner of my eye this movement in my periphery, and I squinted through the sheets and saw this thing coming up out of the woods fast towards me. This rippling animal bounding out through the woods, through the yards, right up to my window, and I was almost at eye level with an otter. And we stared at each other for about 20 seconds, and I feel like we communicated. I feel like the otter was telling me, "Can I come in? It is way too wet." Sorry, just not equipped for a wild animal. And boom, it was gone, and I just thought, I am losing it. I'm having imaginary conversations with otters. And Ian came home that day, the day of the otter. And he is an editor at Yankee magazine and told me about an actress who had contacted him, Victoria Rowell. She's a TV and movie actress who was interested in having Yankee magazine cover her wedding. And she didn't really realize that Yankee magazine is not necessarily a publication that does celebrity weddings, but she was very gracious and invited Ian and I to come anyway. And I was excited. This was the beacon I needed to get me through the next few days of rain, because there would be celebration, there was going to be good food and music and exciting people. And Victoria Rowell is an African-American artist, so I just, I knew that she probably wasn't going to join my group, but for a day there would be two of us. So the day of the wedding, we were running late, and as I sometimes am, and we pulled into the driveway of the Dublin church, and I was like painting my toenails in the driveway, and trying to quickly but carefully walk with wet toes up the steps, and which is why I didn't notice when I opened the door and almost ran smack dab into Samuel Jackson in a seersucker suit. And I just thought, there's Shaft in a seersucker suit at the Dublin church. And I didn't know what to do with that, so I just kind of said, excuse me, quickly, and I just hurried in and stumbled into the sanctuary, and the doors open to a congregation that was filled to the gills with people of color. And I've been in the sanctuary quite a few times. I grew up going to the Dublin Lake and visiting my grandmother for holidays. And so, I had been in this church a lot. I had been in this room. But it was the first time I had been in that sanctuary. It's the first time I had been in any room in Dublin. It's the first time I had been in any room in New Hampshire and not been the minority. And I just looked at Ian, my husband, and he looked at me, and we looked around and were just kind of smiling. It was kind of cool. And the ceremony was beautiful, equally beautiful, the reception. There was great music again and good food, and I was meeting new people who were, interested in the fact that I didn't know anyone at this wedding, but even more interested that I was a Black woman living in New Hampshire, to the point where I was taken by the hand by one gentleman and led to the different tables. This is Grace. She lives here. Yes. Well, it certainly is beautiful. And I said, yes, it is. And I thought about it. And I stopped and I stood back and I looked around at the beautiful old shingled house where the wedding was held, at the giant dinner plate sized peonies in the garden, and the field, and the old stone wall, and Mount Monadnock looming over us. And I turned around and just felt this pride, and just became aware of the fact that these fancy people could have had their wedding anywhere they wanted. And they came to my town. And I just looked around to admire where I lived, and felt grateful. And as I looked, I turned and I saw a tree, and from that tree there was a swing hanging where a little boy was, and my husband was pushing him on this swing. And I stopped, and it was one of those moments where I knew my place in the world, and I just felt grateful. And I just thought about the future that I was going to have with this man, this green-eyed, freckle-faced man who was mine, and the family that we were going to start. And I just stood there with my hand over my heart and smiled, and I realized after a moment that there was someone standing in the middle distance thinking that I was looking at them with this loving gaze. It was Samuel Jackson. But it didn't matter. Because I knew where I belonged, and I knew what home was.